just set up our tutorial for the HPS IS300 intake. Going to be doing it on our sedan, which is kind of our time attack build, if you want to call it something. So far we've got our equal length header, the step tube header. So we start with a real head diameter primary tube, and then we're stepping it all the way up to 2.5 inches, all the way up to 3.5 out the exhaust. So we're going to be dynoing this after the install, and right now I'm going to blow off the dust off this old guy that's kind of been sitting around. I haven't had a whole lot of time to work on this thing, but hoping to get a little bit more time after we do this intake install. So we're going to lay out the kit. I've pre-assembled a few things, put the intake kind of together here, got the support bracket on, taken the K&N filter out of the box, also kind of pre-positioned that heat shield. So we've got the 2 hose clamps on it, and then I'm just going to be using my handy Makita impact driver with a hex to 3/8 socket converter, and then I got the 10mm deep socket, the 8mm, 10, 12, and 14. There'll also be little Allen head screws for that mass airflow sensor, and then the evap solenoid bracket right there. We'll have to do a little bit of wrenching. So this certainly isn't all the tools you'll need, but just kind of a quick layout of what I'm going to be using. Let's dig into it. First we're going to loosen this. I've already loosened that one. I'm going to go ahead and loosen that too. That should release that whole coupler. I'm going to unplug the mass airflow connector. And there's this little harness attachment here. It's a little bit tricky to see, but there's a flathead detent that you can just release this clip. Take off the breather vacuum reference here. So now this whole tube is kind of free to pop out, with the exception of getting that one little clip out. I'll grab a flathead pick, or a flathead screwdriver rather, and a pick, and kind of almost forgot to disconnect the negative battery terminal. Probably really do this anytime you're dealing with a sensor, anytime you're dealing with plugging and unplugging connectors. Sometimes the ECU, even though it's not necessarily connected to those sensors, you can have current leakage, and those contacts might still conduct somewhere you didn't want them to, or you might zap them. So it's always a good idea to disconnect the negative terminal. I think you can also tell this car, when we got it, didn't have a battery retainer, and we're going to be putting on one of our battery bars here in another install. There's 2 little detents that hold it in there, and so you're going to press in one side and then kind of wiggle it out with the other. Doing this one-handed, so makes it even more of a challenge. So I've got one side out. Boom. That's a closer look at that clip. I'll pull a few other pieces off here. Ram air scoop, single 10mm. That pops out. Now we've got the actual cover for the air cleaner. I think we can actually kind of leave that on. And you can see there's a 10mm head there. That's a 12 down there. Both of those aren't actually installed on our car. We did do some throttle body testing on this earlier, and I guess when we put it back together we didn't hit all the bolts, but kind of makes this process a little bit easier. So there'll be a few other screws to pull out. Since we loosened this coupler before, now we just need to pry that off. And this is kind of out of the way. Oh, there's one more clip I forgot about down there. So we'll try to get that guy off. And same technique. Just gonna push in one side. And push in the other. Boom. No problem. And if this is as loose as I think it is, the whole thing's just gonna pop right out. Except that we do have that 112 down there, so I'll grab that. Actually, it is a 10mm. Good old Toyota using 10mm everywhere. Mr. Intake, our little evap solenoid is still connected to this box, and that's going to be another 10mm coming in from the side here. Just not to lose that. Again, doing everything single-handed here. So just to get that hose connection, got some of my long reach needle nose stork pliers here. Alright, that hose. Now look at all that space. Plenty of room to install that intake. Just a quick matter of reference here. We're going to be using these two locations for the heat shield mount, I believe. And then we're going to be using this evap solenoid, and we're going to mount that to a separate bracket. And we're going to pick up the support for the intake on this hole, which is an M6x1. And then going, back up to the throttle body. Just a quick plug, you can see our long tube header again, manufactured by PPE in Arizona. Really the best manufacturer out there for exhaust and header systems. Now we're going to pop off this solenoid actually, and I'm going to do that kind of the same method. This guy's release is at the top there. Again, kind of doing it one-handed. And then I'm just going to pull it off. Yeah, it didn't work that time, did it? Yeah. So we're just pulling that off. I'm going to pull off. This is the output from the evaporative canister fuel tank. It's a little EPA system to dump the fuel vapor back into the intake. So if your gas tank is sitting there on a hot day, it's just taking all that fuel vapor, instead of venting it to the atmosphere like it used to in the old days. It's actually recirculating it in the intake, and sure, the engine will just burn that up. So we'll be taking this hose off, kind of loosen it again with these pliers, and once you typically get it loose, it should just slide off. We're going to be taking all these things off, and they're replaced by HPS silicone vacuum hoses / I guess in this case, fuel evaporative hoses. We're going to mount this relocation bracket to the evap sensor. I'm going to use the old 10mm head that was holding it onto the airbox, and some of these knurled nuts to mount that all together. It looks like that. And where we're going to take this is we're going to take it and mount it right to that bolt that is holding on this ABS distribution block. And that's going to kind of keep it out of the way. So we've got our 10mm gear ratchet, open wrench. I'm just going to loosen that guy. This is actually just a floating little grommet mount. So this ABS block just kind of floats in there. Here's the evap mounted, and I don't know if you can see, but this nut doesn't have a whole lot of thread, but again, because it's just kind of a bumper mount, see this ABS block, it just kind of floats in that rubber. But it's just something to be aware of, that we are using up a lot of that stud to try to attach that bracket. So the bracket thickness is using up a lot of the thread that would normally connect. Now we're just going to loop these two together. Again, that's just going to put the fuel vapor on the head side of this solenoid, and then when the solenoid opens, it's going to go into the intake. HPS doesn't call for the hose clamps to be reused, but I'm going to go ahead and put them on there anyway because I don't want to lose those hose clamps, and chances are if I just have loose hoses around, I'll probably lose those hose clamps. Our hoses were pretty toast as it was, just given the age of the vehicle. So yeah, we're just going to reuse those hose clamps. Okay, so we've got that silicone hose on there. Again, I'm going to reuse those hose clamps here and here. They're not especially tight or anything. It's just, hey, we have them, why not use them? And then down here, I've gone ahead and replaced. I pulled out the screw that was here, and we've replaced it with this absorber mount that's going to be the base of the heat shield. This one over here is that spare hole that was open, that after we disconnected that 10mm head, it's an M6 thread on here. So this was actually a 12, so it's an M8. This is an M6. So just to make sure that you're using the right nut on the heat shield mount, and you're going to slide that heat shield over, put on the two nuts on that, and hook up the ram air, hook up the evap connection to the intake tube, and then this thing's pretty much ready to go. Next, we'll do the mass airflow sensor swap over to the new intake. So here's the mass airflow sensor. I've already taken apart these two screws. They're just a standard Phillips head. And if you look at them, that's what's called a plastite screw. It's intended to dig into plastic. Not too many times, I'll add. So that's really why you don't need a lot of torque when you're reinstalling a mass airflow sensor. So you took it off to clean it. I'm going to pop this one off, just kind of show you. So that wire there is just kind of the control wire, and then there's two hot wires. They're a little bit tricky to see, but they're down in that little cavity there. Two hot wires, and they're going to meter how much airflow is going across based on how much heat is taken off of those wires. So we're just going to go over here, you know, without messing around. We're just going to go ahead and reinstall this into the new sensor flange. And I guess it's important that, you know, this really only installs one way. The new hardware actually uses a 3mm Allen head, and it's going to be these two socket cap screws. So when we're threading that in, we're just going to do it by hand. Again, we don't need a whole lot of torque here. And if you strip out the flange, then you're kind of sunk. So the best way to start threading something is usually to turn it backwards until you feel it kind of settle into the thread. And that's when you know you're at the start of the thread. Everything should go in super easy. Do that again. Just kind of feel it click and boom. And I'm just going to tighten these, you know, until they bottom out, and then maybe another little twist there. One of the things about these Allen wrenches is they have a length to them, and they'll kind of limit torque themselves. So you can see it's twisting, but I can't really put that much torque on it. So if you use the long end of the wrench, you're going to get that torque limit. So I had to charge the camera a little bit, but you can see I've installed the M8 side, the M6 side. I've tightened up these clamps, and I do like to kind of put the clamps so that the solid band is facing to the outside. I just think it looks a little bit better when I haven't rubbed a bunch of stuff on the silicone, that is. Fasten that 10mm back over here. And this is now, you know, it's nice and flexible. You don't want things over constrained, because you want them to move a little bit when the engine's moving. When things have too rigid a mount, usually they fracture, come apart, that kind of thing. And one other thing, I did pre-assemble this wrong. I didn't put the absorber mount in there. I just had the straight screw in. So we all make mistakes, live and learn. Put that absorber on there, and now this bracket will have a little bit of flexibility on where it mounts. We still need to tie that to the evap solenoid, but I think at this point we can actually take this whole assembly and I'll put it on. Slides on until the dead end point on the throttle body. Again, you want to put the hose clamp to where you can access it. Those guys are going to be 10mm. I'm going to slide this breather reference on there. You can see where this kind of mounts on there. Originally I was a little concerned that it mounted where our hood prop kit does, and it doesn't, so that's cool. It just mounts right back there. And yeah, that's going to be it. We've just got this one connection here we've got to put back on. Again, I'll probably reuse the hose clamp on that. Okay, so I'll put the hose clamp back on. Now there's plenty of room to hook the solenoid connector back in. Nice positive click. And we're going to tighten some clamps and we're good to go. It's probably going to be better if I have two hands. Okay, so we're all done. Tightened this screw into the body. Actually added a little relief coil in here like HPS suggests. Got the hose clamp back on. Mass airflow sensors torqued. These two clamps are torqued. And again, we're not trying to squeeze and deform the coupler. You're just trying to get an air seal. This thing isn't under boost or anything crazy, so just getting it tightened down. Those are nylocks. So don't deform your clamps. Don't over torque them. These things aren't intended to take a lot of stress. They're high quality clamps, but you can destroy anything if you put too much force on it. So aside from that, we're going to reconnect the terminal to the battery. And note that this whole time, I haven't had a hood prop stick in my way, because I'm using our original, very first product that we ever did, hood prop kit. complete bolt-in. Uses 2 locations, right around the factory hinge. This is our latest version, which is V4, where we made a few adjustments to this bracket. We actually took away a stiffener plate that was spot welded, and we're able to get enough structure just out of the main bracket by adding a few more bends in it or extending the bends. So anyway, that's our install tutorial on the HPS intake for the IS300. This covers 2001 all the way up to 2005. And I hope you love yours. Hope this thing was a great purchase for you. And again, we'll have some more install videos to come. Thanks, and subscribe down below.